Hi, welcome to today's video. My name is Paul. So today is day 18 of this watercolor challenge that I'm trying. It's the penultimate day. Tomorrow's the final day. So today is, well, a little bit different. I wanted to look at this idea of loose watercolor painting and try and define at least how I think of loose watercolor painting. What does it actually mean? So it's not an exact science, but I'll try and define it at least the way I look at it. So if you imagine a scale or a spectrum, at the one end we have these very tight, controlled, detailed paintings, and at the other end we have very loose, abstract paintings. And in between is really what I think of then as this sort of loose, impressionist painting style in watercolor. So today, to try and illustrate this and to illustrate some of the differences, I've created 3 paintings, not just one. And the 3 paintings, so the third painting is pretty much an abstract painting. The first painting is a usual sort of loose impressionist landscape painting that I do. So then the second painting is somewhere in between painting 1 and painting 3. So the 3 paintings are these 3. So this is sort of the usual loose impressionist landscape that I would do. And you can see this one over on the right is heading much more towards sort of abstract painting. It's very loose, it's very messy. You have definite shapes and it sort of suggests a landscape, but it's getting further and further away from representational art. And I think that's one of the things about this sort of looseness, if that's a word. The more loose the paintings are, the more abstract they're going to become. So then the next part of the video is just briefly going to look at painting these 3 paintings, just a minute or 2 of each, just to show some of the differences and to talk about some of the differences in approach for loose watercolor painting. Okay, so this first painting then was the loose impressionist style. And if you've watched any of the other videos in this series, you'll probably have seen me painting several of these landscapes, and I follow the same sort of pattern each time. So you maybe see that the top half of the paper is sort of glistening. It was quite wet. I just soaked it with clean water. And then I start putting on the blue pigment for the sky. So it's a wet in wet technique. Then the next stage will be putting in a horizon line and then putting in foreground detail and so on. And most of these paintings follow that sort of pattern. You'll also notice that there's no underlying pencil sketch. And that's important for loose watercolor paintings. You can put in a pencil sketch, but it should only be there as a kind of scaffold, sort of confidence booster to let you know where the main shapes are going to be. But if you approach the pencil sketch as something that is set in stone and that you have to obey at all costs, what you'll end up with, you may end up with a fantastic painting, but it won't be a loose watercolor painting. So there's nothing wrong with pencil sketches, but don't treat them as something that you have to paint within the lines. Go with the flow sort of thing and keep it all very loose. With these impressionist style paintings, you can see I add details, scratches and dry brush lines and these little dabs of pure color. It all sort of adds detail or implied detail. And as you'll see with the second and third painting, there's less of this detail added. Okay, so this is then the second painting. So this is looser than the first one, but it's still, I suppose, sort of an impressionist style painting. One of the main differences is, especially in the bottom left hand corner, you can see there's a lot of white paper still, and I don't really cover up all of that white paper. I leave some of it. But other than that, and the fact that it's a bit messier and I don't take as much time and effort with the details, other than those things, it's very similar to the first painting, the sort of loose impressionist style. We'll see with the third painting things start to get a bit looser and messier. One of the other things I did with this painting was, usually I have the paper taped down onto a board which is about sitting at an angle of about 20 or 30 degrees, but this time I propped it up so that it was vertical, which means that the wet paint is sort of running down the paper, and that adds to the whole messiness, the looseness of it, if you like. Okay, so this is the third painting, and you can see the board is vertical again, so the paint is running down the paper. Again, it's pretty much a landscape, but you can see the sky is just sort of scribbled in. It's just a little bit of blue pigment just scribbled onto the paper. The paint is running down the paper. There's splashes and bits all over the place. Basically, as you get more and more loose style, it does tend to get messier, and you end up with more abstract shapes than definite landscape. So I should say it's not as though one style is better than another style, or I'm making any judgment calls. It's just they're different. It's just a degree of looseness in the painting. Some people prefer the tighter, more detailed paintings. Other people prefer the more abstract style. And then people like me prefer sort of middle ground, the more impressionist style. I don't hate abstract art, but I don't really do it. This is one of the first ever sort of somewhat abstract landscapes that I've ever tried. So you can see the paper, it's very wet, and you can see the paint running down and blending with other colors. So again, these are the three final paintings. The one on the right is the more abstract one. The one on the left is the more usual sort of impressionist style I do. So I hope the video was of some use in trying to define how I see the idea of loose watercolor painting. And I see it not as a binary thing, as in this is a loose watercolor painting and that isn't. I see it as more of a spectrum from abstract through to very tight, controlled, detailed paintings. Okay, if you'd like to subscribe, click on the big red button below, and hopefully see you in tomorrow's video, which is the final video in this watercolor challenge series.